है। ओके, जिस तरह से मैंने बात की थी कि हम स्टार्ट कर रहे होंगे 10th चैप्टर से, फाइनली हम ऑर्गेनिक केमिस्ट्री स्टार्ट कर रहे हैं, जो हमारी बुक का आखिरी पोर्शन है प्रैक्टिकल से पहले। ठीक है, तो स्टार्ट करते हैं इसके फर्स्ट पेज पे। इसके फर्स्ट पेज पे थोड़ी सी इंफॉर्मेशन है, अ फ्यू पीसेस ऑफ इंफॉर्मेशन मेरे पास पेपर में आए हुए हैं, बहुत कम आए हुए हैं, रेयरली आए हुए हैं, लेकिन वो हम करेंगे। आई वांट यू टू गो अहेड एंड अंडरलाइन द मटेरियल व्हिच आई आस्क्ड यू टू। पहले हम इसे थोड़ा सा गो थ्रू कर लेते हैं, इनमें मैं बताऊंगा कि इसमें से आपको क्या अंडरलाइन करने की जरूरत है। ठीक, सो just a minute, get started. See, second. Let me get it magnified. So, carbon's amazing versatility. हमने कार्बन को स्टडी करना है, बेसिकली पूरी ऑर्गेनिक केमिस्ट्री कार्बन केमिस्ट्री है, कार्बन पर डिपेंड करती है। और पूरे पीरियोडिक टेबल में इतनी इंपॉर्टेंस सिर्फ एक एलिमेंट को क्यों, क्योंकि उस एलिमेंट को ही उससे एक पूरी ब्रांच बना लेना केमिस्ट्री की। एंड ऑर्गेनिक केमिस्ट्री इज नोन टू बी द वन ऑफ द बिगेस्ट ब्रांच ऑफ केमिस्ट्री सो फार। तो हम क्यों एक केमिस्ट्री की ब्रांच भी पैदा करते हैं और उसे दुनिया की सबसे बड़ी ब्रांच कहते हैं, और कहते हैं कि उसे एक एलिमेंट से बनी हुई है, कार्बन से ये अकेली। तो बेटा उसकी वजह ये है कि हमारे पास जिस तरह से यहाँ पे इन्होंने एक्सप्लेन किया हुआ है, कार्बन इज अ नॉन मेटल. It is present at the top of the group number 4 of the periodic table. It forms covalent compounds, and the uniqueness of carbon, because of which we have created all of this, uniqueness of carbon lies in the fact that different ways in which it can form bonds. And you know, when it comes to covalent bonds, it's just not just one type. It can be a single covalent bond, it can be a double covalent bond, or it can be a triple covalent bond. All of this is something that we have studied back in chapter number 3 of this book in the bonding portion. So I hope you're familiar with that. Carbon exists in several different forms. Two of these forms we have met earlier, diamond and graphite. Once again, chapter number 3. Third form is fullerenes and carbon nanotubes. Let's discuss about fullerenes. Both of them are used in nanotechnology. Nano is a word which we use in mathematics, physics, and chemistry for scaling. On a scale, when we talk about length, when we talk about the standard basic units, nano means 10 raised to power minus 9. For example, 10 raised to power 3 is known as kilo. 10 raised to power minus 3 is known as milli. 10 raised to power 6 is known as mega. 10 raised to power minus 6 is known as micro. In the same way, 10 raised to power minus 9 is known as nano. Nanotechnology is the technology in which we develop very, very small things that are not visible to naked eye, but are visible through usually microscopes and this kind of instrument. Okay? So what we get from these two structures, fullerenes and carbon nanotubes, is the ring structures that carbon can form, and they have been recently highlighted in revolutionary images. For example, take a look at this image. This is a computer image of a structure, and every red ball in this structure represents a carbon atom. In total, the structure is made up of 60 carbon atoms, hence the formula carbon 60. It is the first fullerene to be discovered. Okay? The structure remembers the panel structure of a modern soccer ball. इस तरह की हमें मॉडर्न सॉकर या फुटबॉल की बॉल मिलती है, ठीक है, ये बड़ा से मिलता जुलता स्ट्रक्चर है, ठीक है. So in IBM laboratory they came up with these revolutionary structure, and not just one. Pentacene and fullerene have been shown over here. These molecules have been observed electronically, and the microscope were able to probe structures at an atomic level. Now we have even better microscope. The image you see in part B seems to be a very vague image, a bad image, or what we call a poor quality nowadays. Why? Because we have much more sophisticated technologies at home in the form of cell phones, laptops, and different other gadgets. Now, let me tell you, this is a very old image. Okay? The current images are even much more refined, high definition, and we can see far better than this one. So this is a very old image. Don't go with the concept or the idea that we still have very old equipment and we can't see at atomic level, let me tell you, we are very well able to see at atomic level at this point, and the pictures are not this kind of big. They are actually high definition pictures. See? So these are the things that are used. What we need to memorize over here as a part of exams, as a part of papers, is that let's underline these lines. Let me bring the spotlight. Carbon is a non-metal in group 4, something you've already studied, but underline it. You're going to memorize it. This part of the chapter is a part of chapter number 10, as a part of carbon's versatility, as a part why we developed organic chemistry, a separate branch of chemistry, and a whole lot separate set of compounds. Why did we do that? Why? Because it can form covalent compounds. The uniqueness lies in the fact of the different ways it can form bonds. Two elements we are familiar with, diamond and graphite. Third form is fullerenes in carbon nanotubes and used in nanotechnology. For example, fullerene has a formula of carbon-60 and its structure resembles to a soccer ball. This is what you need to underline and remember. Any questions from this part so far?
सर ये जो से हैं कार्बन जो से डिफरेंट फॉर्म में एग्जिस्ट करता है, तो सर इन सब में जैसे डायमंड ग्रेफाइट में फर्क सर इतना एटम अरेंजमेंट का फर्क होगा?
जी, एटॉमिक अरेंजमेंट का, बॉन्डिंग टाइप्स का, जो स्ट्रक्चर हमारे पास फाइनली मिलता है उसका, इन सब चीज़ों का, बहुत सारी चीज़ों का फर्क है, सिर्फ एक चीज़ का फर्क नहीं। फॉर एग्जाम्पल बैक इन चैप्टर नंबर 3 जब हम डायमंड को डिस्कस कर लेते थे, उसकी बॉन्डिंग को डिस्कस कर लेते थे, तो बॉन्डिंग में जो डिफरेंस था, लेकिन हमने एक सेपरेट टेबल पूरा चैप्टर नंबर 3 में डेवलप किया हुआ था, जिसमें हमने डिफरेंसेस नोट किए थे, which talked about hardness or slippery touch or electricity capability, whether they are conductors or not, or their densities or some other properties. For example, diamond had a very sparkling behavior as compared to graphite. So we studied a whole lot of difference in properties as well as in bonding back in chapter number 3. So yeah, these are the differences present.
और सर डायमंड और ग्रेफाइट के हमने यूजेस तो सर हमने पहले पढ़ लिए थे, और बाकी दो टाइप जो हैं उनके यूजेस
just in nanotechnology, that's about it.
सर ये दोनों नैनो टेक्नोलॉजी में इस्तेमाल होते हैं,
right?
थर्ड और फोर्थ,
correct. Fullerenes and carbon nanotubes are both used in nanotechnology.
also एक बार रिवाइज कर देंगे नैनो टेक्नोलॉजी क्या होता है?
Nanotechnologies is the technology of a smaller scale of equipment. Nano means 10 raised to the power 9. We're talking about equipment whose height, length, or width or area can be described in nano units. 10 raised to the power minus 9 meters or 10 raised to the power minus 9 of so on, like weight in grams and so on and so forth. आपको नैनो टेक्नोलॉजी को डिफाइन करने की जरूरत नहीं है. तो all you need to memorize is the stuff that I have asked you to underline. More stuff you go with, the more you're going to put on your mind, which will not be asked in exams. That won't be good. Yeah, for your information, that's good enough. But when it comes to memorizing, please stick to the lines. G, anything else?
Okay, sir. No, sir.
All right. So moving on, let's come to the next page. Page number 253, the unique properties of carbon. Because we haven't yet completely answered the question why a separate branch and why the biggest branch. Okay. Unique properties of carbon: amino acids, simple sugar molecules, fats, relatively simple molecules with the construction of complex molecules such as long chain carbohydrates, proteins, DNA, which makes life possible, shows the versatility of carbon containing compounds. How? Carbon is unique in the variety of molecules it can form, and hence we have a separate branch, organic chemistry. So what is the fact behind it? That's given in the pink portion. All the reasons that are behind this such a huge branch of chemistry are given in this pink portion. First, out of 3 special features, first feature, Carbon atoms can join to one another to form long chains. Atoms of other elements can also attach to the chain. And by chain, we're talking about covalent bonding here, so don't forget it. Okay. Second point, covalent bonding is not just of one type. It can be a single covalent bond, it can be a double covalent bond, or it can be a triple covalent bond. Third and last, carbon atoms can also arrange themselves in rings. Clear? So this tells us that how many different ways they can form bonds. And if they can form bonds in different ways, they can form compounds in different ways. And if they can form compounds in different ways, they're going to form a whole lot of compounds, hence a separate branch, hence the biggest branch of chemistry. And as far as the versatility is concerned, we have discussed complex molecules, carbohydrates, proteins, sugars, amino acids, fats, and the list goes on. And all of these are biological molecules. Either we are made up of them, or our nutrients or our food is made up of them. I hope that's clear enough. If you have any questions, go ahead. Okay. When it comes to discussing biological compounds, I hope you have studied them in detail in biology. When I'm taking names, carbohydrates, proteins, amino acids, simple sugars, complex long chain carbohydrates, fats, all of these words, DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid, I think you're pretty familiar with them from biology. So if any of these words you're not familiar with, or you don't understand the meaning, or you might have probably forgotten because of a long vacation, go ahead and ask. Don't hesitate. We can even discuss a little bit of biology over here to make sure that you understand the chemistry.
सर मुझे क्लैरिफाई सर करने दें सर, ये पिंक पोर्शन की वजह से सर लिखा हुआ है, इसकी वजह से हम ऑर्गेनिक केमिस्ट्री में कार्बन को इस्तेमाल यानी बेस करते हैं.
बिल्कुल बिल्कुल. This is the basic reason. This is the chemical reason, the biggest reason because of which we have a separate branch in such a big branch.
Okay, sir.
अभी पूरा clear नहीं हुआ होगा. I've yet to show a few figures. I've yet to build your imagination. These are just words. Wait and let me show you full diagrams, and you can build up your imagination according to it. Okay? But so far, if you have any questions up from these words. Okay. Now, in order to properly elaborate the words, let's go with the diagrams at the bottom of this page, next page. This is a diagram of double helix DNA. I hope you're familiar with DNA from biology. You understand what the words double helix, or what the words DNA, or what the words deoxyribonucleic acid, or what the words helical or spring-like structures represent. If you have any issue with any of these words, or if you don't understand their meaning, please ask. Don't hesitate. Okay. Now, as you might see in the diagram, the left-hand side is what those helical springs can be a part of our imagination. On the right-hand side, this is actually just a collection of atoms in a proper arrangement, which we are calling a DNA. Now, let me tell you, the whole life depends upon this construction. Take an atom out of this construction and put it on any other part of construction, the whole construction gets bad. Hence, we can call it by many names: defaced DNAs, abnormal DNAs, abnormal structures, and even cancer. So you would understand, and you would make an imagination that this structure, this whole pattern of putting the elements and atoms together, has a very proper meaning to it. And it try to just anything, try to move anything, and you may come up with something that is either not feasible or a poor form of life, or life deformed by a simple change, by a very small change, in fact. Continuing and building more parts of imagination, take a look. When we are going to discuss these uh, molecules or these compounds of carbon, some of them are what we studied back in chapter number 3 when we were talking about the bonding. Now, let's start from the very left and from the very top. Take a look at the first carbon, that is methane. The central black ball is carbon, and the lines that are shown on our outside are hydrogen. This is one carbon and four hydrogen. This is methane, the natural gas, the sweet gas, which we talk about at our homes, which we use at our homes for domestic purposes. All the food you're eating right now is probably made with the help of this gas. Then comes ethane, then comes decane, and there are simpler molecules. They combine together to make larger, complex molecules, or if not complex, long chains. That is a very good way of building imagination when it comes to the words that we discussed in the previous page, forming long chains. Let's come to the B part. Now, we can show them in another way. We can show the carbon atoms with black balls, and we can use simple white transparent bonds in order to show hydrogen. Or if you're talking about some other element in carbon and hydrogen, we can use another color. For example, oxygen over here is displayed in red. Now, these are all single bonds shown so far. Let's talk about a double bond. A double bond is shown in a different way, like this one. This one is ethene. This one is something that we drew back in chapter number 3. Actually, that's a part of book as well. And then we have, what do we have over here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is hexene. We'll come to the naming part. Don't worry, step by step. Moving on, they can form rings. Take a look at this ring. This might not be an exactly circular ring, but this is a ring of glucose. The name you might have studied a lot of times in biology. When we talk about biology, there is a few set of chapters that keep talking about the same molecule over and over again, whether we are discussing plants, or we're discussing animals, or we're discussing nutrition, or we're discussing photosynthesis. This word keeps coming up, glucose. But when we talk about its chemistry, here's a ring-like structure that we were previously discussing. Or all of these molecules are very simple, small, contains less number of atoms. Take a look at this one. You will even have a harder time counting all the number of atoms. Why? This is a bigger structure. It more like resembles the face of fork, a table fork actually. And this whole diagram is to show you the versatility. And let me tell you, this diagram is a very small representation. Okay? Any questions? I'm going to keep building up that imagination, but before I take my next steps, any questions from the data we have studied so far?
सर बी में एल्केन्स क्या होते हैं?
I'm going to discuss about the names one step at a time. I intentionally skipped the name because this name is given or defined at the bottom of the same page we are at, but one step at a time. I'll define what alkanes are.
सर रिंग लाइट स्ट्रक्चर का क्या मतलब है?
Do you know what a ring is?
Yes sir.
Okay, the question wasn't about imagination. The question was more mathematical. A ring or a circle does not have a corner or an end or a start. A circle is actually a thing in which the first point or the last point are joined together in such a way that there is no start or there is no end. You just simply choose a start or an end. आपने बच्चों को देखा है ड्राइंग करते हुए? Let me quote an example. एक सर्कल ड्रॉ करना होता तो कोई बच्चा यहाँ से शुरू करके उसे यहाँ पर एंड करता है, कोई यहाँ से शुरू करके यहाँ पर एंड करता है, कोई नीचे से शुरू करके यूं कर लेता है, कोई साइड से शुरू करके यूं कर लेता है. Have you seen people drawing circles? They may start from any point, and at the end of that drawing, this join the start and the end in such a way that you won't be able to find what was the start and what was the end. That is the basic concept of a circle or a ring. Do you get the point?
Yes, sir.
Now, this point was only talking about maths or imagination. Let's talk about the perception we take of a ring in chemistry. Now, take a look at this ring. When you talk about the ring, these are the outer parts of the ring. Let me spotlight them for you. These are the outer parts of the ring. Now, it's in the exact center. These are the outer parts of the ring. The ring actually is this inner part. Take a look at it. One carbon, second carbon, third carbon, this oxygen, fourth carbon, and this fifth carbon, right? So these five carbons and one oxygen make this entire ring. And now, can you tell me which carbon is the start and which carbon is the end of this ring? No, we can't. We would never know. In a ring, in a circle, you would never know what was the start and what is going to be the end. They're all actually connected to one another. And in this case, they're connected to one another with the help of single covalent bonds. Now, do you get the chemical perception of a ring?
Yes, sir.
Good, good. Now, I'm explaining these points so that you can have a very good imagination about these structures. Any other questions before we move any forward?
No, sir.
Okay. Now, I am in one sort trying to answer Shahzeb's question, but I'm going to answer it exactly when we move on to the definition. Now, let's take a look. One carbon atom, four hydrogen atoms, two of these structures combined together, two carbon atoms, and the rest all are hydrogens. 10 of these structures combined together, or eight of these structures combined together. So 8 hydrogen atoms and rest, 8 carbon atoms and rest hydrogen atoms. What if we combine 40? What if we combine 70? What if we combine 100? What if we combine 1,000? What if we combine 1,000,000? Take your imagination as high as you can. Which tells you what? There can be a whole lot of combinations that are almost uncountable, right?
Yes, sir.
Now, that's what imagination, that's where the imagination parts kick in, and that's where you can think why we call it the largest branch. Now, in a specific type of compounds, which we are calling alkanes, hydrogen atoms are joined on the side positions of the chain, and the inner part of the chain is made up of carbon. The same structure is this. This is the same structure. It's just that it has different number of carbon and hydrogen atoms. It has different number of carbon and hydrogen atoms, but the build is same. Internal part is carbon, and on the external sides, we'll see the hydrogen atoms attached. And this diagram only talks about versatility in terms of what? In terms of 3 atoms, carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. What if we can attach more atoms? What about nitrogen, phosphorus, sulfur, fluorine, chlorine, bromine, iodine? The list goes on. And yes, we can attach those atoms. And again, we'll be able to make new molecules. So here we're talking about billions of molecules in that way. And I'm not going to end this topic over here. We will keep imagining how big that branch is by studying more topics. So moving on. At the bottom of this page, you'll see a few topics. What we are going to do is that we're going to start with 10.2 alkanes. And we're going to start that by the key definition, what is a hydrocarbon. But before I do that, let me tell you how we're going to proceed with this chapter. This chapter is all about different families and different methods of how organic compounds are made. अब जितने टॉपिक्स आएंगे 10.2, 10.3, 10.4, 10.5, they're all about separate families or separate set of compounds in organic chemistry. ऑर्गेनिक केमिस्ट्री में हम जो भी कंपाउंड्स पढ़ेंगे उसी की तरतीब से होगा। अल्केन से कंपाउंड्स की टाइप है, फिर आगे हमने एल्कीन्स पढ़ने हैं, अल्काइंस पढ़ने हैं, अल्कोहल्स पढ़ने हैं, ठीक है, कार्बोक्सिलिक एसिड्स हैं, एस्टर्स हैं, एंड द लिस्ट गोज ऑन. There are approximately 7 different families that we are supposed to study in chapter number 10. And when it comes to a family, we'll discuss or introduce the family to you. So there is simply an introduction. Then we'll talk about their physical properties, and then we'll talk about their chemical properties, their reactivities, and their uses in your daily life. And let me tell you, when I'm going to go through this stuff, I'll be quoting a whole lot of examples of things around you that you're using in your daily life and you're not familiar with they're organic or not. First of all, on the previous page, I just proved that each and every single one of you is organic. Being a human means being organic. And not just that, I simply called every part of your nutrients or food, carbohydrates, fats, proteins, and stuff like that as organic. Because your major food portion is based on this part. Water is inorganic, but these parts, carbohydrates, proteins, fats are organic. So it means you're eating organic and you're turning into an organic structure. So what we simply say is that life is built on organic chemistry, and that is entirely true. Okay? Continuing, let's define what a hydrocarbon is. A hydrocarbon is a compound that contains carbon and hydrogen only, which only consists of two elements, carbon and hydrogen. अब आप सोचते होंगे कि periodic table में 100 से ज़्यादा elements हैं, सिर्फ दो elements को मिलाकर हम इतनी बड़ी branch कैसे बना सकते हैं? Yes, we can do that. Okay, so let's go with a small exercise. I'm going to spotlight a compound and you're going to tell me whether it's a hydrocarbon or not. Remember, if it's a hydrocarbon, it is supposed to only contain carbon and hydrogen. That's about it. Okay? So let's start asking from, who do we ask? वासे है, वासे से शुरू करते हैं. चलें जी. वासे, the spotlight is near a compound. Is it a hydrocarbon or not?
Yes, sir.
And why?
सर क्योंकि सर इसमें सिर्फ हाइड्रोजन और कार्बन है.
Mm-hmm. What about this one?
No, sir.
Why?
सर इसमें ऑक्सीजन भी है सर.
Very good point. It was a very simple question, and Vasu, thank you. You answered it well. You may mute the mic. Okay. So it is very simple. If it's made up of carbon and hydrogen, yes, it's a hydrocarbon. If there is a third element besides carbon and hydrogen, it's not a hydrocarbon. Which means every diagram over here, which consists of any other color besides yellow or black, is not a hydrocarbon. So every diagram which consists of a red ball representing oxygen atom is actually not a hydrocarbon. It still is organic. I'm not saying it's not organic, but in organic, what we are trying to do over here is to make different bifurcations and to understand those bifurcations as separate families. One of those family is hydrocarbon. How is hydrocarbon defined? It is made up of only carbon and hydrogen. And that's about it. It won't contain any third type of an atom in their structure. Okay? As simple as it may seem, just a minute. Chas, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank God. My computer got stuck. And it happens most of the time when I have the participants list open in front of me. And as soon as I try to close it to focus on the book, this happens. Wait a second. Maybe more. Fine, it's working now. So that's how simple the definition of a hydrocarbon is. Around 6 million compounds of carbon are already known. By 6 million, we're talking about 60 lakh compounds of carbon by just combining two elements, carbon and hydrogen. Okay? And they are considered as simplest types of organic compounds. The hydrocarbons that we study at this level are subdivided into two families, the ones that are known as saturated, which only consists of single covalent bonds, and the other ones would be unsaturated, which might contain a double bond or a triple bond, which is not mentioned over here, which will be mentioned later. However, if you would like to write it over here, let me help you. Okay. Saturated hydrocarbons contains only single covalent bonds, while unsaturated hydrocarbons contain at least one double or triple bond. Okay, you may want to write it on your book. So these are the two classes of hydrocarbons that we're going to study in detail in this book. And which one are we going to start with? Saturated hydrocarbons, which consist of only single bonds, and which we're going to name as a family by the name of alkanes. This is the answer to Shazib's question. Alkanes are actually hydrocarbons made out of carbon and hydrogen only. They are saturated, which means they're only going to contain single bond. There would never be a double bond or a triple bond in their structure. They're going to be based upon chains. And I'll also explain what this general formula is, but tomorrow, not today. That would be all for today. If you have any questions, go ahead and ask. If not, then we're going to wind up this class.
सर वैसे सर मेरा एक सवाल तो है लेकिन वो लेक्चर से रिलेटेड नहीं है.
हाँ जी पूछें.
सर मेरा सर काफी ज्यादा कंफ्यूजन है सर. मुझे सर सेल, एक ह्यूमन सेल और एक एटम का सर फर्क क्या है?
बेटा सेल बहुत बड़ा स्ट्रक्चर है, एटम बहुत छोटा होता है. एक सेल जो होता है वो मिलियंस ऑफ एटम्स से बना होता है. एक्चुअली सेल मिलियंस ऑफ मॉलिक्यूल्स से बना होता है और मॉलिक्यूल्स एटम्स से बने होते हैं. सो एटम एक बहुत छोटा लेवल है. ठीक है ना?
सही है.
इसे लेवल कहते हैं बायोलॉजी में, और बायोलॉजी में ये जो लेवल है ये इतना अच्छा हमारी बुक में नहीं डिफाइन होता जितना अच्छा मेट्रिक की बुक में डिफाइन होता है. अब मैं आपको बहुत बेसिक से शुरू कर रहा हूँ. सबएटॉमिक पार्टिकल्स, इलेक्ट्रॉन, प्रोटॉन्स और न्यूट्रॉन्स, फंडामेंटल पार्टिकल्स जिन्हें कहते हैं, कि कंबाइन करके बनाते हैं एटम्स. एटम कंबाइन करके बनाते हैं मॉलिक्यूल्स. मॉलिक्यूल्स कंबाइन करके बनाते हैं सेल्स. सेल्स कंबाइन करके बनाते हैं टिश्यूज, organs, organ systems, and an entire organism. ठीक है? This is pure biology. There is a little bit of chemistry in there, of course. तो हम ये करते हैं कि हम केमिस्ट्री में मॉलिक्यूल से कंपाउंड्स तक स्टिक करते हैं. फिर जब वो बायोलॉजिकल स्ट्रक्चर्स बनाना शुरू हो जाता है, सेल्स, टिश्यूज, ऑर्गन्स, ऑर्गन सिस्टम्स, ऑर्गेनिजम्स, तो हम इसे बायोलॉजिकल पार्ट में स्टडी करते हैं. Because then they start to be a part of a life. And studies of life is biology. Clear enough? Any other questions, beta?
तो सर जैसे सर एक ब्रिक है सर, वो तो सर सेल से नहीं बनी ना, तो वो सिर्फ एटम से बनी होती है.
जी बेटा, इसमें फिर फर्क लिविंग और नॉन लिविंग कहा जाता है. एटम्स कैन बी कंबाइंड इन सच अ वे that they may contain life or may not. If they don't, then we call them non-living things. और फिर उसमें ब्रिक की एग्जांपल लें, चाहे किसी भी और नॉन-लिविंग थिंग की. आप चाहें तो आप बेशक शाज़ेब की एग्जांपल ले लें नॉन-लिविंग थिंग्स में. क्यों शाज़ेब? ठीक है. हाँ जी, कोई और क्वेश्चन नहीं आयान? क्लास खत्म होने वाली है. This class may might end because it's just less than a minute left.
No sir.
Okay, okay. Then I'm going to wind up the class myself. ठीक है? Take care बेटा. हम कल ये कोर्स से पहले कुछ एक्स्ट्रा मटेरियल स्टडी करेंगे ताकि वो क्लियर कर सके आपके अगले दिनों में आने वाले टॉपिक्स को. ठीक? So keep the copies with you or books with you or pencils with you so you can write the extra material in there. Thank you class. Allah Hafiz.